What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Moonring, a retro 2D RPG in the style of things like Ultima that released late last year in 2023, and while you might be under the impression that I am therefore somewhat late to this, I assure you that after a lengthy consultation with several of the gods of this universe, we decided that this particular day was in fact the best day to cover this video, so you're going to have to take it up with them, which brings us to the actual content. So what is Moonring? A few things to know right away. This game was developed by a single person who just so happens to be one of the co-creators of the Fable series, and what's more, it was released on Steam completely free. But I want to emphasize that this is in fact just a full-blown RPG that they dropped. It's actually pretty impressive in its total scope, if anything, and if you happen to be wondering why the game was released for free, admittedly like I was, the short answer is that the creator felt the goodwill from doing so was worth more than any small amount of money that they might have gained from this game otherwise. And from there, let's talk a little bit about the world itself. Moonring takes place in the land of Caldera, a land of endless darkness, which is why this sort of neon aesthetic is everywhere. Now, a couple decades after that initial plunge into darkness, light came back to the world in the form of 5 moons. These moons brought with them strange gods that have then called people to worship them via their dreams. Oftentimes, when someone dreams of a particular god, they devote themselves to that god, but there are still others who are dreamless, which just so happens to be us in this case, and the dreamless are free to choose their own path, one of which might just be being an Archon, which is all of the gods' mortal representative in order to maintain balance. And when the beginning of our adventure puts us onto a mystery of sorts from our previous guardian who has passed away, we start exploring the land and interacting with all of these gods and peoples, and discovering everything there is to know along the way, which can include things like the game's hidden magic system, procedurally generated dungeons, or exploring the hand-designed open world. But with all of that in mind, you don't really make a character so much as just start with your basic sprite, but what you will be doing is customizing that character as you go, and this is usually done through the game's devotion mechanic or more traditional stuff like gear. But basically, as you complete certain tasks, you'll earn devotion, and you can spend this devotion on powers and abilities associated with individual gods, which gives you access to that ability for starters, but also increases the stat associated with that god as well, which is how you're going to unlock the ability and meet the prerequisites for new gear and upgrades to things like weapons and armor, which is going to allow you to travel to more dangerous areas and uncover what there is to know there. Now, this is done through, again, a handcrafted open world that you can explore, but some of the quests you can get up to along the way are going to send you to the game's procedural dungeons. You'll be locked in these dungeons when you enter, and you'll have to run through the whole thing trying to find the master key or completing your objective, or sometimes both, in order to actually get back out again, which is going to involve some exploring and some combat, naturally. Now, combat is probably the most archaic piece of this, as you have essentially ranged or melee options, and melee is basically just running into the enemy and you'll auto-attack with whatever you have equipped, and then ranged is activated via a hotkey, and pretty much everything to do with your character is displayed on the static menu to the left, which includes stuff like your stats, health, and poise. Now, enemies will hit your poise first. This is basically like an armor rating that refills over time outside of combat. So in theory, you want to keep that high and avoid taking too much damage to your health, which actually has to be healed. You also have to watch how much you're eating, as failure to keep your character nourished will in fact lead to degraded ability to recover things like poise, but there are some other elements to this as well. For instance, you can sneak. It is possible to get into places you shouldn't be, so to speak, and you can also turn on friendly fire and just attack everyone in a given town. Now, out in the world, you have your location map and then your broader overworld map. You can leave pretty much anywhere whenever, and time moves a bit faster on the overworld map because you're traveling greater distances. But in towns and settlements, you also have to think about things like your reputation, which you can increase by donating gold to that settlement, which will increase the rarity and tier of goods that that particular town has on offer. But you can also find all sorts of secrets and hidden things as well, such as fake walls or information to talk to specific NPCs with, because this game uses that very retro style of dialogue system where you actually type in what you want to ask individual characters and they are set to give a certain response to certain entries. Now the basics of this are pretty straightforward because some of the main prompts you'll give them are highlighted as you're talking to them, and the game does a pretty good job of even sort of flashing these words up above your head as you're talking to these NPCs in case you happen to forget any of them. And with just those few simple systems, there's really a ton to uncover and explore here as you learn to get to grips with how everything in this world works. And it's all done in a way that feels like you're actually exploring and learning something at your own pace, going the direction of which you happen to choose, which is probably, I would say, the most remarkable thing about this little indie game, and what I would say is going to make it worth playing in the long run. And I think all of that comes together to make a pretty impressive title for a solo developer who released this game for free just for funsies. And while I think games like this are just very inherently not going to attract everyone's attention due to their retro approach and art style and everything, there really is a great RPG under here, and it really doesn't get much better than free. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this video. If you do wind up trying Moonring, or you have tried it for yourself, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments section below, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.